What's going on, Babylonians? It's me, Songs of Raids, back with another Outriders WorldSlayer video to bring to you, and today we're going to be covering build theory with the minigun tank Technomancer builds. Now, obviously the minigun has already had a little bit of a nerf with the fact that we're having the mods removed, so you will no longer be able to do the exploit to be able to put your weapon mods onto your minigun, which is a bit of a sad time because obviously people had a lot of fun with that exploit, but I can understand with the fact that we're going to have 3 weapon mods and obviously other people potentially being abusing it. I can kind of see it, and obviously we don't know if there's going to be anything more that's going to be coming our way for the minigun to be able to make it into a more viable build to be able to go forward, but I can imagine we've got something in the works. So what we're going to be doing with this video is looking into the current minigun build, the current setup that we have for it, and seeing is there a way that we can actually use the Pax tree and the ascension trees to be able to obviously make it into a better build right ahead for you. So before we go any further, make sure you drop a like and a subscribe, it really does help the channel out, and let's get right into it. Alright, so first and foremost, as we always do, is cover the Pax trees. Now, the Pax trees are obviously going to be the more defining kind of characteristics as to how this kind of works. So the Pax trees are obviously where you take your specialization, you take your skill tree, and obviously you then make it so it's a little bit more powerful. Obviously, it has to meet certain conditions, but overall, it's basically a really strong way to be able to actually make some builds even stronger and obviously more DPS or support focused, especially in the case of the Technomancer. Now, when it comes to the minigun, after having a bit of a brief overview looking into the Pax trees, it's not very easy to be able to tell how we're actually going to be able to make this into a good one. For example, the reason why I say that is because if we have a quick look into the Pax tree, and if you've looked into one of our previous videos, there's not like a dedicated skill tree to be able to that kind of screams out minigun. Like we've got, for example, ones that scream out firepower Technomancers, we've got ones that scream out triple turrets, all that kind of good stuff, but we don't have anything that pretty much goes, well, you've got a minigun, here you go, this is probably the best path for you, kind of thing. There's no capstones that pretty much directly call out the minigun. The only closest one we've got is the fact that there is a tool of destruction mentioned for the interrupt skills, and that's not really going to work because I don't think the minigun counts as an interrupt skill. That's only purely the rocket launcher variant of the tools of destruction that kind of do that. So what we're going to have to do instead is try and gather as much anomaly boost as well as like damage boost as we actually possibly can, because basically any kind of like multipliers that will actually apply to the minigun under the circumstances it's able to do. So we can't do critical shots, so we have to be able to rule out things like the burrowed explosive, because otherwise that would have been a really good one to be able to go for, because then it would just be offering a really nice damage output for the minigun every now and then. So we've got to be able to look into, we've got to be a bit more smart about it, we've got to have a look into it. So if we go into the skills trees, if we look at the bottom tree, because the bottom tree is normally primarily there for the anomaly power, we've got ways to be able to increase our skill leech. Now skill leech is obviously quite nice, but when you actually play as a minigun, you don't really lose too much of your health, so therefore you're not actually getting a much kind of like a benefit out of the undying as it probably sounds like you're going to get on paper. Now obviously skill leech is still quite nice, so therefore you will actually just be able to keep yourself topped up even easier, and obviously when you actually pair that with the override, you're able to get more anomaly power depending on your skill leech, so that's a nice little boost right there, I suppose, which you just get as standard. So I can't really make an argument to say it's a terrible choice to be able to go for. I just don't think it's the most ideal one. Apothecary is actually quite nice if you were going into a support, because obviously you basically become a rock. Basically people can come up to you and obviously still benefit from all this healing, and because you have a minigun that's constantly chewing out rounds and you don't have to worry about reloading or anything like that, you're actually able to put out a lot of damage, so therefore you're actually healing for a lot. So in terms of like a build for yourself, if you were playing solo, it's not amazing. It's definitely not the way I would go. But if you were actually in a team setting, this could probably be quite nice to be able to actually keep some of your squishy your teammates alive. So I could potentially see some kind of argument for that. Now, going into the rest of it, this kind of depends on what other skills you are planning to be able to use. Now, if you are like some people that actually do use like the turrets to be able to apply statuses, so either the blighted or the cryo, you can actually go for Purification Protocol to be able to obviously be more of a team player, to actually feed into this pulse mechanic, to be able to remove statuses or negative statuses against yourselves, and also to be able to replenish ammo, and it also grants increased damage for 5 seconds for you and your allies. So this could potentially be a way to be able to do it. Now, it doesn't specify what kind of damage, so I'm hoping it's just a global multiplier, in which case that way the minigun will actually benefit from it. But if it was, for example, like weapon damage, and it just doesn't mention it on the card, then you won't actually see anything for the minigun. So that one's going to need a little bit of testing, but I believe it's going to be the former, in which case we're actually going to see a nice 25% damage increase right there. But unfortunately, I don't think this is going to be the best way to be able to go for it, because the middle tree, if we're still on the bottom tree and we go for the middle, we're now looking at overheal, which we can't actually benefit from because we can't do critical shots with the minigun, so that's pretty much scrapped right there. Hastened influence is probably a really nice one to be able to go for, because it reduces incoming cooldowns for your skills by 1 second for every status that's removed by you or applied to an enemy player, and it's just. But you don't intrinsically have a way to be able to apply any kind of status, so therefore you're not really benefiting from that either. You're kind of reliant on your own teammates to be able to get your cooldowns back even quicker. And then the last capstone is your interrupt skills remove effect resistance, but you don't have one because the RPG is the one that's classified as an interrupt and the minigun isn't. So therefore, the bottom tree is not the best way to be able to go from. You could make an argument and say that there's a way to be able to benefit from it, but I just don't think it's the play. So instead, what I'm going to suggest is you actually go, as an anomaly power build, go for the top tree. Now, the first one, get initial strikes, actually does give you a 15% boost to your anomaly power every time you use a new skill for 5 seconds. So that's actually quite nice to be able to actually benefit from that. So that will actually help to be able to increase your initial damage as a minigun. Obviously, the shorter of a cooldown of a skill that you have, the better. So maybe a blighted turret would actually be the best one to be able to keep that boost right there, just be able to keep it going. But obviously, we'll play into some kind of builds to be able to find out which is the best way to be able to do so. After that. There's no point going for brain dead because we don't benefit from weapon damage, so we don't do that. So we'll go for lethal devices instead. And what this allows us to be able to do is it gives our minigun the way to be able to inflict toxic to enemies that we hit, and it also deals an additional 10% of our anomaly power as damage if toxic was refreshed. So this is going to be a nice DPS boost right there and then for our minigun, because it also allows us to be able to benefit from maybe using like ammo refreshing kind of mods like toxic lead, so we actually have a reliable way to be able to refill rather than relying on quartermaster or our blighted turret to be able to inflict toxic. On top of that, we also have the our anomaly power is able to be inflicted even higher, because obviously the previous one increases our anomaly power higher. And then on top of that, because we're a minigun build, we can go for Massacre, and Massacre will then obviously stack our anomaly power even higher on top of that, so therefore we're actually able to deal even more damage with this additional 10% of our anomaly power as damage if toxic was refreshed. So this is a really nice way to be able to actually refresh it, and I do think this is going to be a really nice way to be able to inflict all that damage. Now, if we go from there to painkiller, now obviously damaging an enemy gives us health regen. It's not really going to help us, and it's definitely not going to help us with the cycle mod. But what we can do is the middle tree on this goes for sniper weapons, so we definitely do not want that. And the bottom tree then focuses on being able to use critical shots to be able to inject with anomaly power. So burrowing charge, as nice as this would have been to be able to actually benefit from this, unfortunately the minigun cannot crit, so therefore, well, at least in its current state anyway, so therefore it's just not the way to be able to go for. So therefore I would recommend that we actually do go for the top tree, in which case inflicting toxic on an enemy has a 100% chance to inflict a random additional status. And then if we go for the capstone, every single status that's on an enemy, then we deal 10% more damage, which I believe is a global multiplier, the way it actually reads. So we're actually going to start stacking up the additional damage on a minigun. And I think this is going to be a massive change for the minigun, because this means we're actually able to inflict a decent amount of damage. Whereas like before with the minigun, it always used to be a really slow start. And then obviously as you start killing some smaller enemies and you start stacking up Massacre, then yes, you are able to get quite a bit of damage done. Now we're actually going to be able to actually benefit straight away from our global multipliers. We're going to be able to get some more status effects. We're going to be able to refresh Toxic just as standard to be able to keep ourselves all topped up with our ammo. And on top of that, we're also going to be able to deal more damage to enemies the more statuses we apply. I'm really excited to actually see how this is actually going to play on paper, and I do think this is probably going to be the best kind of track to be able to go for when it comes to actually playing as a minigun techno tank right there. Now obviously if we then move our way over to the ascension trees, now obviously this is where it's actually going to start stacking ourselves up. So the anomaly tree is going to be the most important one out of all of this, because the anomaly is obviously going to either boost up our anomaly power or resistance piercing, or even further our anomaly damage. We can also go for skill leech if you were still going for that bottom tree, which obviously if you put enough in there, you will see a nice anomaly power increase right there and then. But I do think it's probably best to go for the anomaly power, and then also to be able to go for the anomaly damage. There's going to be some kind of mix, depending on where the diminishing returns actually starts kicking in. It may be best to actually have 25 in each, but we also have to factor in the resistance pierce, because if we actually go for resistance pierce, that means more damage is actually starting to get through all the enemies, and on top of that we can then also use unstoppable force to actually feed that straight back into our anomaly power, so we actually get a double benefit right there and then. If we go for brutality, I don't think there's much we're actually going to be able to see come from this, mainly because this is all weapon damage. So weapon leech, weapon damage, long range damage, and close range damage is not going to help. The only one that we can actually go for to offer any kind of benefit is going to be armor pierce. Now the reason why is because we can have no resistance against the fortified to be able to start feeding that back into our resistance pierce. And then from our resistance pierce, we can then feed that back into our anomaly power. So this could be another way to be able to boost our damage output that way as well. So I do recommend that you put all 50 in there, because you're not going to get any kind of benefit whatsoever out of the other 4 nodes that's currently in that. Skipping our way over to endurance. Now obviously the main things that we have in here are going to be health, armor, healing received, elite damage mitigation, and resistance. Now as a techno tank with the minigun, you don't necessarily actually have to worry about any of these things. Now I do think armor is probably going to be the best shout for that, but maybe actually dropping a few points into health wouldn't go amiss. The other argument you could potentially say is either healing received or resistance. I mean, technically there's an argument for all of this, but I don't think you need to really worry about too much. Maybe you could put a couple of points into elite damage mitigation, just in case there's actually some elites that are actually going to be dropping in WorldSlayer that are going to be causing a problem. But overall, I think armor and health are going to be your main ways to actually go for in that node. And then lastly we have prowess, and prowess actually has a couple of really good options in here. Now the main ones that you want to be able to avoid altogether will be critical chance and critical damage. The reason why you want to be able to avoid these is because they literally offer nothing for the build, because we're not able to actually do criticals, and regardless of how high your critical chance actually is, we're not going to be able to actually do a crit in the first place. So therefore, because it's physically impossible, make sure to actually avoid those two at all circumstances. Now the main one that I would probably gravitate towards would probably be damage against elites, because I think that's probably where the minigun actually kind of struggles compared to some of the other builds. Now obviously it's really good to be able to start ramping up with Massacre, and once you actually do have that at 5 stacks, then actually it's really good at taking down elites, but obviously getting to that is the problem. And if there's only elites, then actually having damage against elites will probably be very nice. The other shouts you could potentially have are magazine size, to obviously increase the amount of ammo that you actually have with your minigun in the first place. But I do think having the 100% additional ammo mod on your armor is probably more than enough in the first place, but obviously dropping a couple in there probably wouldn't hurt too much. And also cooldown reduction, depending on what skills you are playing to be able to take out, potentially could be a really nice shout to be able to go for. But I do think that the main damage that you're going to be inflicting probably would be best to go against damage against elites. And there you have it. That's everything that we currently know when it comes to Outriders WorldSlayer, paired with everything that we already know and love when it comes to the original game of Outriders, at least for the minigun build in its first step. So this is how I would currently start building my way up to be able to make, with the new pack trees, with the new ascensions and all that, this is how I would start actually making my minigun build. And overall, I'm actually really excited to see what damage output we can actually get, and if it's actually going to be an endgame viable build. Let me know your thoughts if you would actually change any of the stuff that I've already just talked about. But that pretty much brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for all of you to be able to watching this far. Thank you all to the Babylonian family, as always, for their continued support. There will be more build theory videos coming in the near future, and hopefully you enjoy this kind of format, and we will definitely be doing some kind of like players for other kind of Technomancer, Devastator, Trickster, and Pyro builds in the near future, ready in time for when WorldSlayer actually does drop, so we have that information to hand ready to go. So thanks very much, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on our next video.